Hello, my mutts. Surprise, we are back again. The Cadaver Dogs are here with another Minisode. I'm Devin Shepard.
And I'm David B. Jacobs.
And as I said, we are the Cadaver Dogs. And today we are coming at you with a guest on our Minisode, again with the top 3 rankings. We have Austin Torres from the Would You Die podcast, who is also a horror filmmaker just like us. So we're going to get real nerdy this episode. I'm very excited. Austin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you again. Like I said, we're going to get down and nerdy because you are also a filmmaker.
Yeah, I have a film going through like the Midwest film festival circuit, I guess you can say. It's called Ice Scream. It's exactly what it sounds like. A demonic ice cream truck stalking a poor girl. Everything you want from a movie called Ice Scream.
This is so up my alley. I don't think you understand my obsession with ice cream on top of my obsession with horror. And the fact that it stars a female is even better. I will want to be her.
Well, watch the movie. Maybe not. It's a pretty, I think it's gnarly, but I don't know. Are we allowed to say our own films are gnarly?
Yeah.
Of course you can. You're supposed to.
Yeah, I think so. We shot it last year, and then it premiered in April, and it's going through the different horror festivals in the Midwest area. So I'm really proud of it. At the time of recording, I'm going to the Motor City Nightmare in Novi, which I think this episode is going to come out after. So if you have a DeLorean, you can go check out Ice Scream at this convention, Motor City Nightmare convention. But I'm super excited. I think it's gonna be fun. And then I just finished an Indiegogo campaign for my next short film. It's called Spider. I'm really digging deep into my personal arachnophobia for this one.
Oh, David is feeling the bond right now.
Fellow arachnophobe. I had very hardcore arachnophobia growing up, so
Same here. I don't know if your experience is like mine, but when I was growing up, I loved monster movies. So there was this film coming out. I was like 7 or 8 at the time. It's called Eight-Legged Freaks. And I begged my mom to go. And she's like, no, I don't want to take you to this movie. You're not going to like it. But I begged and I begged. So finally she was like, you know what? Fine. I'll take you. But you have to watch the whole thing. And I said, no problem. And I was so scared. I was so scared. I blame that movie for giving me arachnophobia. I used to have like zoo books, if you guys remember those things.
Oh my God, the best.
I had one, I think, with spiders on it, and I used to read that one a lot, not after that movie. Nope, I never touched it again.
I will never watch that movie or arachnophobia. I'll never watch either of them. No.
Oh yeah, no. Was that your first foray into horror? Were you a horror fan before that?
I was a horror fan that didn't know I was a horror fan, if that makes sense.
Same.
Yeah. I think again, David bonding with you there. Yeah. He's nodding his head.
Yeah, I've always been a monster fan, but it wasn't until high school when I saw Scream for the first time where I was like, you know what? I think I am a horror fan. I think I like this stuff, but I didn't realize it until then.
Also same.
Yeah, you guys have the same story. I'm like freaking out now.
I love it. I know this is an audio podcast, but I can see that American Werewolf in London poster behind you, David.
Yes, indeed.
That's one of the most influential films for me too. So
I love that movie. I saw a screening a couple weeks ago with a Q&A by Griffin Dunn after the screening. It was really cool.
I'm so jealous. So jealous.
I canceled all my plans. I'm like, no, I've got to go see the screening now. Griffin Dunn is going to be there.
I would do the same thing. Like, believe you me.
Yeah, definitely.
I also have to point out, Austin, I see your ghost face. You can't see. I have a Scream 4 and a stab behind me as well.
I love Scream. Definitely my favorite slasher series, and honestly, just one of my favorite movies. Like, I'd say Scream is. First off, Scream 4 was the first slasher I saw in theaters,
Oh
so
my
Scream
gosh.
4 will always have
Oh,
a special place in my heart.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think same. Wait,
You too?
maybe.
I think
Now
mine was
I'm
your
trying
next.
to think. What?
Mine was your next, I think.
I missed your next in theaters.
It depends on definition of a slasher.
That's true.
I
There had to been like a sorority row kind of like big studio girls running in bikinis film.
Not for
Maybe
me.
Rob Zombie. Halloween was before Scream 4. I don't know.
Rob
Halloween
Zombie's
was
Halloween
before
was
Scream
before
4.
Scream 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I take my back.
I did not see that movie in theaters. I was in middle school and too scared.
Yeah, I didn't see it in theaters either, thankfully.
But Scream 4 I did, and I loved it. I'll never forget seeing that movie in theaters.
Can you let us know a little bit about your podcast? We listened, we love it. It's another one that like
Aw,
has such a good horror community around it and is doing so well for like just showing how great the horror community is because we can self humble brag. That's a thing, right?
that's a thing. You guys have to be on my show soon. We got to do the other half of the crossover soon. But yeah, Would You Die is that's my little podcast. I started that February of 2022, and what I do on that what we it's me. What I do on that show is I get a guest every week, and we talk about their favorite horror monster and villain, why we love that character. So, for example, let's say my guest of the day was who's a random person, Jeff Goldblum. And he's like, I really dig the xenomorph from Alien. I'd be like, great taste. That's my favorite monster. But we'll talk about why we love Alien, why the xenomorph scares us. Depending on the guest, like some guests will take a more academic approach to like the meaning behind Samara coming out of the TV and what that meant for the millennial generation. Why after watching Scream we don't like answering the phone, stuff like that. And then I'll also have some people that are more casual where like I had someone talk. This is one of my favorite episodes, but I had someone come on to talk about Jason Voorhees, and it turned into a fuck, marry, kill with Jason, Michael, and
Oh
Freddy.
my God.
But yeah, it's a really fun show, and I think my favorite thing about doing the Would You Die podcast is I get to talk to horror creatives, horror fans, like just all kinds of filmmakers, artists, writers, podcasters, musicians, actors, just anyone that has something artsy to do, or they're just a fan. Like I've talked to teachers, I've talked to all sorts of people. We just love horror, and we all have our own experiences with these incredible characters and monsters, and that's what keeps the podcast fun for me.
That's so cool. Who's been some of your favorite guests or what's been a favorite episode of yours?
I don't want I don't want to say favorite guest because I don't want other people to feel bad, but I do have to say my most recurring guest, his name is Bobby Torres, no relation. He is the best. He has a YouTube channel called Bobby Likes It Spooky, and he has a couple of podcasts, The People Under the Scares. He's been on my show 6 times, so I feel obligated to shout out my homie, but I've had a lot of really cool people. As far as episodes, I'm really proud of, I call it the Spartans in Horror special. I went to Michigan State University and we had a tragedy earlier this year. So I wanted to do something to celebrate the Spartan community. And I waited a few months because horror is not always the best thing to celebrate after tragic situations. But I was able to talk to a filmmaker, Brett Miller. He went to Michigan State with me. One of my professors, Bill Vincent. A friend of mine, she's an actress. Her name is Betsy Baker. She was in The Evil Dead. So she has that state connection. She went to state. And then an author who we're friends now out of the blue, his name's Josh Mallerman. And I think he's best known for writing Bird Box. But we are all Michigan State grads. And I think that would be my favorite episode because we were able to celebrate not just the horror community, but also the Spartan community as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I mean, yeah, the community that's really strong in horror is always what
Yeah.
I tend to love most about it. Yeah. Well, I'm going to lead us into our main discussion for today, but we will link your show and where people can find you in the show notes. But for now, I think a lot of what you were saying is actually going to cross over into our topic today, which is debatable, questionable horror movies that we love that may not have been marketed as horror movies, but we can argue them as horror movies. It's a very vague question, but I think one that's going to lead to a lot of really interesting conversation. And I feel like a conversation that is constantly ongoing in the community. If that wasn't clear to any of our listeners, you'll figure it out when we get into it. You'll see.
This is an interesting one because there's like different ways you can take it. Like you can list just your favorites of that category, or you can go with the most outlandish picks that you can think of, which is what I did.
Oh, fuck yes.
Yeah, I just went completely like no one considers this horror, but I think it's horror.
I went with the ones I have to argue, like I have to defend their honor the most.
Nice.
Perfect.
So I'm aiming for this to be the final time. I know it won't be, but I can dream. But the final time I have to argue my points on these. Like this is a definitive why the debate is they are horror. But at the same time, I get counterpoint, I guess.
Well, start us off. Starting with your number 3, what is your third favorite, likable, debatable horror film?
So third one was really tricky because the first two were really easy. I have those ones a bunch. So the third one, I had a really, really hard time narrowing it down. But eventually I settled on the 1954 Japanese, the original Godzilla.
Nice.
Oh, fuck yeah.
We covered it.
Oh,
in our main
yes.
episodes. Yeah. We did Godzilla and The Incredible Shrinking Man was an episode that we recorded released back in February. And we were talking about the fallout for both America and Japan from the atomic bomb. So obviously I agree that that is a horror movie, but make your argument.
I think with Godzilla, I think what makes it a horror movie is when you watch that original film, it's such a somber picture. Like, it's not a lot of fun. It's definitely not like the 70s movies where Godzilla and Mothra are teaming up to suplex King Ghidorah. And I love those movies too, but the original one, you could tell the atomic bombings were weighing super heavily on that nation, as it should. That's an atrocity. I could be wrong on the history, but if I remember correctly, they couldn't really talk about it. They couldn't really express their pain because I guess they made a deal with the United States not to retaliate, so they didn't want any negative US things going out there. And one of the ways they were able to process their grief and their pain and their anger was by making art and making film. And I think Godzilla is probably the shining example of what comes from something so horrible happening.
Yeah.
The first film,
Yeah,
you know.
to elaborate on that, it was they weren't allowed to discuss it. There's basically a lot of censorship while America occupied Japan for several years after the war. And I think that American occupation ended in, I want to say 1952, but I could be a year or two off on that. So Godzilla was one of the first movies to be released after that censorship had ended.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that, because I'm like, I know I got some of these details wrong. But yeah, I think Godzilla, I think it explores themes that are common in horror, like death and grief. There's also a lot of science fiction elements that I feel like science fiction and horror just kind of come together a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Especially in the
something we
50s.
always come back to, I think, in most episodes is Frankenstein. I mean, known as one of the first horror novels is also sci-fi. And it is, a creature, it is a creator. And I think regardless, that creature does feed in and metaphor does creep into most monster films, if not all. Godzilla being one for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why Godzilla probably doesn't keep his horror cred, although if you go to a horror convention, you'll see Godzilla and like King Kong. Got to shout out the other homie, because they're monsters, and monsters should always be welcome at those type of things. But I think the argument against Godzilla being horror is there's, I think, over 30 movies now, and a lot of them are not. It's really just the first one.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's a lot of action, and people, I don't know, sometimes can get territorial around sci-fi versus horror.
Yeah.
I feel.
but sci-fi is not like it's a different type of genre. Like horror is a genre about mood and tone, and sci-fi is a genre about the setting. Like sci-fi horror is a very easy crossover. They're
Totally.
describing different aspects of a movie, so they're not exclusive in any way.
Totally. David, what was your number 3?
So, like I said, I went with a movie that I've never heard anyone refer to as horror, but watching it again a few months ago, I just think this is a horror movie, and that is 1944 Shadow of a Doubt by Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh my God, David, it almost made my list. I swear to God.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was not expecting
love
that.
that movie.
So for those of you who haven't seen that, this is it's like one of the few suburban Hitchcock movies, I think, and one of the few suburban film noirs of that era. And it's Teresa Wright plays a young woman who very much idolizes her uncle, who we are made to suspect very early on has some sort of dark secret, and it's they're both named Charlie, like she's literally named after him, and it's just her gradually coming to realize that there is something off about her uncle, and it is this paranoia around someone who you think you know so well, someone who you see as a family member, who you love, and realizing that even they could be a danger, and it's really fucking good.
Yeah.
So my number 3 is also like in the same realm, and I'm glad that your number 3 was as well, because I did want to talk about that like 1940s, 1950s Hitchcock thriller suspense. Because it usually we always like look at Alfred Hitchcock as a horror guy, but I mean,
Yeah.
like of the time, it's interesting to see how horrors evolved and if we should count
Yeah.
suspense and thriller films as part of the horror genre. Are they a different genre? Where do they cross over? And I think something like Shadow of a Doubt or other Hitchcock films really do toe that line a lot.
Yeah, it doesn't fit in with the horror conventions of that time. Like of that time, the horror movies were The Wolf Man or House of Dracula or whatever. Like they were all the monster movies. They were all supernatural or science fiction. They weren't too much interested yet in the horror of reality, and yet Shadow of a Doubt very easily fits into, I mean, it's not a slasher, so it's not quite like a Halloween type of world, but it is fitting into, it is dissecting the horror of the suburbia of America in this way that the monster movies weren't quite getting at yet. And it feels like if it had come out 30 years later, then it would just be considered a horror movie, full stop. But it's not, because that's not the era it came out in. It came out in a time when weren't the horror conventions. So I'll retract having previously said that Psycho and the Birds were Hitchcock's only horror movies, because Shadow of a Doubt, man.
And I wonder if maybe Hitchcock's later films kind of overshadow, pun not intended, but it is now, overshadowed Shadow of the Doubt a little bit. Because, like, when a lot of us think of Hitchcock, we think of Psycho, we think of Vertigo, which Vertigo has some heavy horror elements, I'd argue. I think it's a lot of other genres, but there's some scary shit in Vertigo. But anyways, I think Shadow of the Doubt gets a little bit forgotten, unless you're a nerd with us.
Hitchcock himself said Shadow of a Doubt was his favorite of his own movies.
I can't argue with him. He has great taste. Is it my favorite? I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there. It's for me.
Yeah.
It's top 3 Hitchcock. I don't know if I could pick a favorite at this moment.
I can't pick
though.
a favorite either. There's too many to choose between, but yeah, definitely up there.
Yeah, that Alfred guy had some bangers.
I think you're so right, David. It is really interesting looking back on these films and comparing them today, because I think some of the most beloved horror films that are being made now are more of those psychological, societal commentaries that are, yeah, if you look at them in comparison, are not very far from things like Shadow of a Doubt. And I'll say, so my number 3 was 1948's Sorry, Wrong Number, which is,
I have not seen it.
oh,
Neither have I.
is also a suspense thriller. Surprise, surprise, it is based off of an old radio play that was like my favorite radio play growing up. But it's basically all takes place over a single night. It's a woman, well, not the film. Basically, it's about a woman who gets on the phone and overhears a conversation about two men who are planning to murder somebody. And then the mystery starts to unravel, and there are some twists and turns, and it is all just like built upon and supported through this single woman's performance as it's another one of those like woman gone crazy kind of stories. But what makes the film so powerful is that you really feel how terrified she is and how gaslit she is and how angry she is at the world. And it's one of those things where, especially in the 40s, a woman can relate to just the fears of society, not believing her or feeling like she can't do anything because she's a woman. So again, all these things that are commenting on society at the time that is, scary, but not necessarily considered a horror film for that day.
Sounds very Gaslight-esque.
It's very Gaslight-esque, yes.
Sounds really, really interesting, though. Like, I gotta add that to the watch list.
It's so good. If you like Dial M for Murder, it's similar but different.
Cool. I dig it.
Black and white?
What's that?
Black and white?
Yes.
Perfect.
I think so. Do you ever think of a movie from that time and you're like, wait, am I imagining that it's black and white just because it's from the 40s?
Yes. I have had that frequently when I've looked at a movie and been like, I thought this was black and white, but it is not. That is I can't remember which ones now, but I know that's happened to me like several times.
That fucked me up at Christmas time because I went to put on It's a Wonderful Life and I found it on Amazon, but I accidentally found the color version.
Oh, what?
Wow.
That was back when I think it was Ted Warner. He had a phase where he just wanted to color all the classics like Casablanca and stuff like that, and just ruin my heart. But I accidentally clicked on that version of It's a Wonderful Life, and it devastated me. I'm still traumatized from it, to be perfectly honest.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry because you just saying that like a colored Casablanca. I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Life. Well,
Colorful Life.
The director of Casablanca, Michael Curtiz, directed several horror movies, which were also some of the first color movies.
Ooh.
With he did in the same year Dr. X and Mystery at the Wax Museum, which is the original House of Wax.
That one's
he
so
did
good.
those with like pretty much the same cast in both movies. They're both really corny and fun, and like totally recommend them.
Oh yeah.
And they were in color. They were two-tone color, which makes it feel more exaggerated. Like it feels more like a black and white movie in color. It's really cool.
I dig it.
Definitely recommend.
I was going to say, I would argue Caligari might also be considered color, ?
Not Technicolor, but yes, I know what you mean.
Yes.
If we're counting that, then like there were a million colored movies in the silent era.
Just say also a horror film. All right, Austin, what was your number 2?
So my number 2 was much easier for me to pick because this one's not necessarily one I have to argue. It's just always left out. And I don't understand. It's one of those ones where it's like, hey, is this film a horror movie? People are like, yeah, I guess. So I don't really get the argument, but it's never featured on the great films of the 80s, which it is. It's never featured on the best scary monsters, which it is. It's an iconic film. Everyone knows it. And I just wish more people recognized it for the horror greatness that it is. And that is a 1987, just balls to the wall, all the testosterone in the world packed into one film. It's Predator.
Oh,
I thought you were going to say Terminator. And then he was in 1987, and I was like, wait, what? I was all that lead up, I was expecting it to be Terminator.
They both have Arnold, so.
They do.
I have never seen Predator.
Well, I hope I didn't over and or undersell it, depending on how you liked my introduction.
I will say you're selling me on it to the point where like, oh, it's been on my list, but now I'm like, okay, now I have to go see this movie now, like tonight.
It is everything you want from an 80, like it's basically Commando meets Friday the 13th.
Oh wait, that's so good.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Do people argue that it's not because it's actiony, or what's the counter here?
I don't think it's more that people argue it isn't. I just think that people never say it
Yeah,
is.
that's fair.
I think Predator scared a lot of us while we were growing up if we watched it at a certain age. I think like what really irked me was I was sorting movies on Letterboxd because I'm a nerd, and when I was sorting them by horror, I realized Predator wasn't there. I'm like, what the fuck, Letterboxd?
Oh, yeah.
It's stuff
Maybe
like
it's because
that.
they're all military, so they can theoretically defend themselves. It falls into the same camp as
I
Aliens
mean,
for me, where it's definitely action horror. Like it's yeah, it's. I mean, none of these movies are going to be pure horror. They're always going to be horror and something else, everything or less. Yeah,
right.
it's definitely action horror, and I guess the action element is probably what holds people back from counting it as horror. The same way that people don't always count Aliens as horror, the sequel Aliens, not the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you
And
saying that they're military and they can defend themselves, therefore it's not what's the argument there,
The
David?
argument, this is
That
more of a
because they're
devil's
military
advocate
it doesn't
argument.
necessarily fit.
The argument there would be that it is more it is a fight. They are fighting against this monster that is more powerful than them, but that's usually the case in action movies. Like you're not going to count
I
Infinity
see.
War as as a horror movie, even though Thanos is stronger than all of them.
I guess my argument against that would be I think Predator has more of an energy to Michael Myers than he
Yeah.
does Thanos. Because what Predator does is he picks off and spoiler alert if you haven't seen Predator, Devin. Um
Plugging my ears.
but all right, good. But so Predator is kind of like Michael Myers in the sense that he's picking off this group of camp counselors. I mean, army men one by one. Whereas Thanos, he just takes all the Avengers on at once. Until he's broken them apart and he can take them down one by one. The Predator, I think, operates more like Jason or Michael. He's a masked killer. We see a bunch of POV shots, and it's not until the very end where the main character, like I don't know, someone like Laurie Strode or Sidney Prescott, like Laurie Strode can't really fight against Michael Myers. These commandos can't really fight against the Predator. They're just overly outmatched.
Mm.
But your final character finds the strength and the courage and they outwit the monster. I don't know if Laurie Strode technically outwits Michael Myers as much as she just outlasts Michael Myers,
She outlets them
but
in the sequels.
Sidney Prescott outwits Ghostface. Yeah, she definitely especially in 2018.
Or
Especially
even
in
before that,
2018.
even in Halloween 2, she has a more active role in defeating him in Halloween 2, and then again in H2O. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
David, what was your number 2?
Completely different, way off the action horror. And my number 3 was in the 40s. My number 2 was in 2020, and that is The Father with Anthony Hopkins.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
I've made this argument I think before on the pod even because did I
Years
Okay.
ago.
Anthony Hopkins plays a man suffering from dementia, but what breaks it off from other movies dealing with dementia is that this one is completely from his perspective, and it is fucking scary as hell. I mean, I am someone who is very much afraid of dementia. I think that is like the scariest illness probably, and the idea of having it is like this is what your world becomes, where it's this surrealist scape where like every 15 minutes things keep changing. People are played by different actors, they give them completely different backstories, and it's not in a way where it's a puzzle movie where like you've got to piece together what's going on. It is outright contradicting other information that you've been given, so that you will never know what's actually going on. There is no way to know what's going on because he doesn't.
Which is just fucking terrifying. I
Yes.
mean, that's just so scary.
Have you guys seen it?
No.
I did see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, under your recommendation because of this. But yeah, I mean, I'm in the same camp. It's like if it's based in fear and it feeds to the fear, no matter what that fear is, and the only reason why we are able to explore horror in so many different genres and so many different time periods and how it's constantly changing in so many new ways is because, I mean, everyone is scared of something different, and yeah, if we ask a lot of people, there's like the the basis of fears, but there's so much that we can do with that, like loss of autonomy, death, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, great movie. I'll never watch it again. Yeah. Devin, what was your number 2?
My number 2. So I chose an Aronofsky film. I think Aronofsky is a really interesting director in that he does toe the line between horror a lot. I think a lot of his films are enjoyed by the horror community, and some of them are seen as like a lot of the horror community has embraced his films, but maybe not necessarily the other communities have declared him a horror director. So I think he does, fall between both quite a lot. And I chose one that most people wouldn't necessarily call a horror film, Requiem for a Dream. This movie just always terrified me. I think it was so frightening to me from the first time I watched it to every time I watched it again. I did have to like wait 10 years before I went back to it because it like shook me so hard. And it was one of those things, Austin, like you were saying at the beginning, that like it changed something in my real life because of the reaction that I had to the film. In terms of like, and I don't want to like go into details, but yeah, in terms of like drugs and stuff, like you definitely going to high school and college, you're going to approach drugs at some point.
Yeah, I have no arguments against. I think it's a deeply affecting film. Last time I watched it was about 9 years ago, so I'm due for my rewatch too.
It's that refrigerator coming at her is definitely something.
Yeah.
I've never been so afraid of a refrigerator.
Okay, but right? And also beloved horror actress Ellen Bernstein.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Less beloved horror actor Jared Leto, best known
Morbius.
For Urban Legend. That's what I said, Morbius.
Is Morbius a horror movie? It's a vampire. Is that a horror movie? I haven't seen it. No.
All right, let's hit our
with both.
Let's hit our number ones, baby. Oh, sorry. Sorry, David. I was looking down. Did you have something?
I was gonna say, I think with both The Father and Requiem, I think that what holds people back is the fact that there's no monster, so to speak. There's no enemy. There's no antagonizing intelligent force. But like, so what? It's scary.
Yeah, existence is horror.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's hit them. Let's hit our number ones. Austin, what was your number 1?
All right. So this is the one that I have to argue. Like, this is the one I will die on the battlefield. I will die on this hill. I will defend it with all my honor. It is my love, my pride and joy. It's the only thing I ever need. It is actually my favorite movie of all time, which is probably why I take this so personally. But I'm talking about the 1993 biggest film of all time until Titanic knocked it out of the park. The sci-fi horror adventure epic that is Jurassic Park.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
It's a horror movie. It's a lot of other things too, but come on. Jurassic Park is scary.
It's so
I think scary. It was only like a couple of years ago when I realized that people didn't consider it horror, and I was just like, what? But there's dinosaurs trying to eat them.
Yeah.
What is their argument? Like, what is the argument that it's not a horror film?
Like, they're like, oh, it's an adventure movie. I'm like, it's both.
Yeah. But what confused me is when people are like, I think it's more of an action. And I'm always like, what action?
It's definitely not an action movie.
The closest thing to action in Jurassic Park is when the T-Rex is chasing the Jeep, where Laura Dern is giving her Scream Queen worthy screams. You know, I mean, Jeff Goldblum has a Jeff Goldblum quip in there because we need that once in a while. Must go faster. But I guess that's the closest thing to an action scene is that 30-second chase sequence.
And that's a chase scene, which is common in horror.
Yeah.
Right. But they are running away from it pretty much the whole entire time.
Yeah.
They never fight the dinosaurs. They can't fight the dinosaurs.
Right.
You can't fight Michael Myers as much, yeah.
Yeah. They fight Michael Myers more than they fight the dinosaurs.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And I got so many arguments for it, but you said this was a mini-sode. I'm not trying to make this a 7-part epic. So I'm going to give you my 2 strongest arguments, if I may. The first one is, first off, you got the GOAT Steven Spielberg coming in with one of the greatest jump scares in any movie. And no one talks about this jump scare, but I'm about to lay it down. I know the great jump scares. It's Exorcist 3, it's Malignant, it's Alien, it's Jaws. Homie Spielberg getting shout out again. But Jurassic Park has an all-timer where the whole film, they're setting up the velociraptors as these scary motherfuckers, right? That's the academic term too, scary motherfuckers. Robert Muldoon is like, they should all be destroyed, and just talking about, the raptors and stuff. When they shut down the park and they open it back up and they see the raptors got out, Muldoon's like, even Nedry knew not to mess with the damn raptors. Like, the raptors are built up the entire at Dr. Alan Grant, like, traumatizes the kid in the desert. Like, and side note, and the kid's like, that's not very scary. That's how I imagine everyone who says Jurassic Park isn't a horror movie, is I just think of
You're
that
so
kid.
right.
But back to the jump scare at hand, we have this amazing sequence where it's cutting back and forth between Queen Laura Dern turning the power back on and Lil Tim trying to get down from the fence. And the whole scene is a suspense scene with the question is, are we about to see a child electrocuted? And the answer is yes. And just when you think you can breathe from seeing a little kid just get yeeted off by being shocked by the electric fence, we push in on Laura Dern. She's finally she's happy for the first time in like 30 minutes of movie time. And she's like, Mr. Hammond, I think we're back in business. And then boom, velociraptor right like on the right side of her face. And I've been lucky to see this film a couple times in theaters. Everyone jumps right there.
Oh,
people forget about it.
It's so good.
Yeah.
The Hill That I Die On is Steven Spielberg is my favorite horror director. So I am so with you there.
Also, Sam Neill.
Yeah. It's just Sam Neill.
Has Sam Neill been in a movie that's not horror?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Sam Neill's a Scream King. No, I get it. And then my other one, it's not as long, I promise. Or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not going to cash a check. I can't, whatever that phrase is. Spare no expense. Anyways, the other argument I make is Jurassic Park is really just the evolution from Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And if you try and argue Jurassic Park isn't horror, then that leads to Frankenstein isn't horror. And I just can't do it. I cannot abide by that. If you're about to go up to me and say Frankenstein isn't horror, you got to meet me outside. Like, that's throwing hands outside of Waffle House at 2 a.m. Like, that's those words. Because, like, to me, Jurassic Park and Frankenstein are very, very, very similar stories. They're about scientists so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yep.
They bring back dead creatures who shouldn't be alive. And oh, wow, these abominations against nature are killing people. Who would have thought? Because you can't control nature when you try to play God. That is pure horror, is arrogant men trying to play God.
I could not agree with you more. And again, coming back to Frankenstein, here we are.
I think people just like... The argument I've seen people make, which I think is really silly, is that it's not horror because they watched it when they were a kid. And I'm like, so?
Okay. But if I watch Hostel 2 as a kid, does that make Hostel 2 not horror? Like, come on.
Well, you're not supposed to watch Hostel 2 as a kid.
That's
true.
David, I'm happy you said that because my number one is technically a kid's movie, so we'll get there. But first, I want to hear what your number one was.
Okay. Yeah, my number one's in a different direction again. And that is the Coen brothers, Bart and Fink.
Nice pull.
There's actually several Coen brother movies that I think could be considered horror. Like Blood Simple is very Halloween-esque and has shots that are like the same shots from Halloween in Blood Simple. No Country for Old Men is kind of a slasher movie.
I'd agree there, yeah.
I think the reason I went with Bart and Fink is that's my favorite of those movies. I love all of those. The Coen brothers are like my favorite. Bart and Fink, if you haven't seen it, this isn't going to sound like a horror movie when I pitch it, but it's about a writer in the 1950s. He's a playwright, and he moves to Hollywood and is hired to write a wrestling B movie, which like he cannot wrap his mind around because he's like super fucking pretentious and doesn't know how to write this stupid B movie that he's not supposed to put a lot of effort into. He doesn't know how to do that, and it's driving him nuts, and he's in this really gross motel the entire time. It doesn't sound like a horror movie, but
relatable.
Have you guys seen this, by the way?
Yes.
Not for a long time. I barely remember it.
Okay, so in the hotel that he's staying at, His next door neighbor is played by John Goodman, and John Goodman, he complains about John Goodman making too much noise, and then he like becomes friends with John Goodman, quote unquote. And I don't want to give things away, but this movie gets really fucking weird and just like utterly bizarre in a way where you start to be like, what's going on? It never quite stops to make complete logical sense. It kind of does, but you still can take everything literally.
Right. It's a little unforgiving. It's a stressful watch. At least it was
stressful
for me. Yeah.
It's very stressful. It's also very funny. It is like a comedy as well, but in a very dry comedy sense. If you've seen Coen Brother movies, it's that style of humor. So my personal interpretation of this movie, which I can't really defend without spoiling the film, but my personal interpretation is that John Goodman is a figure of Barton Fink's imagination who then becomes a vessel for the devil, and he makes a deal with the devil, and the hotel is like literally in and that's like how I've interpreted the movie.
Yeah, essentially it's watching a guy in his hell.
Yeah.
It's his version of hell for sure.
It's very much his version of hell.
Which, like, let's go all the way back to the beginning of the first stories, like, that were religious.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, hell. Frankenstein. No, but hell was, created to terrify people. So I think that can kind of count as, maybe that should count as the first horror novel.
So is it kind of like Faustian, Barton Fink?
Is it Faustian? Not quite. Okay, I'm going to spoil the movie. So if you haven't seen it, feel free to skip ahead a couple minutes. But what happens halfway through is that he sleeps with a famous writer's wife, and then he wakes up to find her dead next to him. We never find out who killed her. It is strongly implied that John Goodman killed her. But then he goes and he asks John Goodman's help in getting rid of the body so that it doesn't look like he killed her. And there's literally a shot like going down the sink drain, like you're going down the rabbit hole now. Things are about to get fucking bizarre. And then, like, John Goodman turns out to be a serial killer, and the cops are on his trail, and then the entire hotel goes into fire, and there's just fire everywhere. And he just starts killing everybody. It's really bizarre.
John Goodman can be scary.
Yeah.
He can be terrifying.
10 Cloverfield Lane.
Right. That's why it's so good, like, to have a beloved actor turn terrifying. It's always such a great choice.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I love him.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll close this out of here. My number one, again, I had to go to kids horror. I think this is one, like you were saying, David, a lot of movies that we watch as kids that were made for kids. I mean, especially our age when we're watching kids movies that were made in the 90s that were, they were way more terrifying than the kids movies of today. I will say, Trolls is terrifying in a different way, but these ones I think were actually scary. So I had a few that I wanted to go through. I know I've mentioned Small Soldiers before on this podcast, so I couldn't say that one again. So I went with Jumanji.
Oh, interesting.
This movie scared me so much as a kid. And I think it's done. Yes, it's an adventure film, but like at the end of the day, though, it has a villain, it has monsters. And just because most of the leads are kids, I don't think we can rule this one out. It has lions. What up?
It has body horror.
Straight up body horror.
Body horror. Yeah.
It has bats. It has a guy with a gun. So it kind of hits a lot of things. A haunted house.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah. Robin Williams gets sucked into a vortex. That's existential.
That was creepy as fuck. Yeah, it has paranormal stuff. Why?
Yeah.
No one ever questions what the fuck's going on with Jumanji the board. Like, that's literally never presented in the film. It's just, yep, we're accepting this, and we're in a supernatural world where people fucking die. It's sad too.
You want your monster. The board itself is the monster.
Exactly.
It's the possessed item. It's the mirror from the Oculus or whatever.
It's like the Rubik's Cube from Hellraiser. No, I know it's a lament configuration. I know it's a lament configuration. I'm a horror fan.
When I dress as Hellraise for Halloween, I should have totally just used a Rubik's Cube.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I should have done that. Oh man.
No, but you're right. Yeah, it's a haunted object. It hits so many of those horror tropes, and yet, I mean, it is adventure, fine, whatever. But I would argue it's a horror film. Again, just having it be based in fear and hitting so many of the tropes too that we see in horror. That people, I mean, it's funny because people argue like what makes a horror film, and they'll mention tropes. And okay, well then I'll use films to show that that those tropes are in movies that aren't considered horror sometimes.
Right.
They frequently are. Horror is it's a really hard thing to define, honestly, which is why sometimes our podcast will absolutely cover movies that people don't think of as horror because what the fuck is horror anyway?
What the fuck is horror anyway? And that's the thing that we always want to be asking and exploring and talking about. Well, I know that we've maxed out on our time here. So I just want to wrap this all up. Thank you, Austin, again for coming on and talking about these movies with us.
It was my pleasure.
So much fun. So once again, can you plug your podcast and let us know where to find you, and as well as your short films?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Ice Cream is coming, or it's doing the festival runs right now. So it's not on YouTube yet, but it'll probably be on YouTube in a couple months. You can find me on my socials on Twitter and Instagram at Would You Die Show. It's on Facebook. I'm on TikTok at Would You Die Podcast, but I don't know what I'm doing with that. For a long time, I was just taking the same video clip of Gizmo and making him dance to whatever random music mashups I can find. I had a viral run. It was like the highlight of my year. And I had Gizmo dance to that Margarita song that was a big hit in the beginning of the summer. That's the only time I ever experienced the high of fame. But yeah, so you can find me the Would You Die podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And follow me, listen to me speak, or don't. It's up to you.
And you also have the Indiegogo, right?
Oh, that just ended. But yeah, I'll talk. Thank you for reminding me. I'll talk about that a little bit. It just ended, but we've reached our goal. We reached our goal. We raised the money we needed. So this August, I'll be shooting my next horror short film. It's called Spider. It's exactly what it sounds like. I'm super excited.
Have spiders on set?
I got a practical. Yeah, we got some practical spider. So
right. Good luck.
It's a spider the size of a football attacking someone who's just trying to house it, and yeah, it should be a gnarly short film. I love that word. So that's my goal as a filmmaker, is to make gnarly shit.
Oh fuck yeah, I love that. And we'll link all this stuff in the show notes, and then we'll also be sharing it on our socials as well. If you follow us at Cadaver Dogs Pod on Instagram or Twitter. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. See you, Mutts.
Peace.